Muy buenos días, hermanas.
Good morning, everyone.
Muy buenas tardes y muy buenas
Good
noches.
afternoon.
Bienvenidas a la jornada de hoy.
Welcome to today's
Gustaría podernos
work
encontrar de nuevo,
so that we
saludarlas,
can fight ourselves together again.
su corazón, sus
And I wish that your heart
energías
and energies
de vida,
are in the right place
pues lo que hayamos vivido en estos
and
días
that whatever we lived in these days
sea
is
algo
an
que nos dé
experience
alegría o algo que nos
that
llene
allows us to have some joy and experience
esa dualidad.
because that's how we live our life in that duality.
Dejar a dos
We're going to leave the space
compañeras
for your peers
hacer el favor de dirigirla.
who are going to lead us,
Espero que ya estén preparadas
and I
para
hope you're ready for it
iniciar.
so that we can begin this process. Welcome, everyone.
Su corazón esté alegre y
And may your heart be here and happy.
entonces con la invocación.
So let's begin today's invocation.
No sé si están listas, compañeras.
Are you ready? Who volunteered?
A todas. A mí me toca ahora compartir con ustedes.
It is today my turn to share with you.
Unas imágenes.
I want to project to you some images so that you can see them.
Bueno, para esta
For this morning, I hope
nos encontremos bien,
all of you are doing well,
tengamos mucho bienestar,
that you have well-being
mismas, con nuestras familias,
with yourself, with our families,
en nuestro
peace,
interior,
interior peace,
para las compañeras que ya es tarde,
and for those who are already going towards the night,
y para las
I hope you had a great day.
iniciando la mañana,
And for us who are starting our mornings, may it be a great day as well for each one of us.
ahora quiero
And I want
iniciar
to
una reflexión sobre precisamente
I want to start a
sobre nuestras
reflection
abuelas
by our
y
grandmother
cómo ellas pues han caminado
and how they have worked
en nuestras comunidades compartiendo
in our communities,
aprendizajes,
sharing their knowledge,
enseñando sobre la vida, sobre las costumbres,
sharing us about their lives, their customs,
son parte fundamental
and how they are
de la
main
organización
focus
política
of our
social de nuestras
organization
comunidades.
in our societies, in our communities,
Reconocidas, ¿verdad? Pero
and they are not
sin
recognized as so. Their role is not looked upon,
también para ellas.
and this is what they are.
Entonces, ahora les voy a compartir también
So today I want to share with you a series of images.
mi región acá en la
They're from my region,
región indígena náhuatl, en el
an indigenous Nahua region
Hidalgo, México.
in Hidalgo.
Y bueno, y no sabía muy bien cómo sobre qué presentarles este día,
I was trying to find a way to present this to you,
a propósito del módulo en el que estamos
but taking into account the module that we're looking at,
pareció muy pertinente, ¿no?
I felt that it was very pertinent to
Reflexionar
start this morning with this reflection,
sobre todo porque
especially because
de la vida, nuestras comunidades, las mujeres, y yo creo que mucho más nuestras abuelas
the women in our community and there's
mucha violencia, ¿no? Y mucha
are lived through through so much violence
por la lengua indígena que
because of the indigenous language that we speak, because many of them
lengua materna, ¿no?
only speak their mother tongue.
Por ejemplo,
Like in my case,
solamente
many
náhuatl,
only speak
es
Nahuatl,
la lengua que mayor predomina en la región.
which is the one that is predominantly in our region.
Esto, pues,
And based on this, they have been violent. They have been victims of violence. They've been victims of discrimination.
Por ejemplo, en los servicios de salud,
And for health services, for example, for education services,
cuando van al ayuntamiento, ¿no? A solicitar algún
when they go to City Hall to ask for services,
con estas barreras
many times they'll find these barriers, which are natural to them. And many times they are not given the proper treatment or even joked on because of how they dress
por cómo nos ven, ¿no? Por cómo se
or how they see us or how they look.
y sin embargo, pues rescatar
Nonetheless, we got to rescue that our grandparents,
muchos conocimientos valiosos
they do have a lot of valuable knowledge.
sobre cómo cuidar
Knowledge
la tierra,
on how to take care of the land, how to take care of water,
estas ofrendas
how to make offerings
cuando se hace la milpa
when they do like milpa, which is a type of fruit here,
del maíz,
the cropping of our
es
corn.
una milpa tradicional, ¿no?
And this is like a traditional way of doing the corn.
Las
and how they plant their beans,
el chile, la calabaza, entre otras
peppers,
verdures que se
and other
producen en la
types of
región
vegetables as well,
y pues cuidan, ¿no?
and how
Cuidan
they take care of the land
estos alimentos que la
and
madre
all of
tierra
this
nos da
food,
y cuidan el agua también, ¿no?
and they
Porque
take care of the water as well.
pues parte de su vida y
And
de sus
part of this
rituales
life
son también relacionadas con el
is
agua.
related to the water.
Ellas siempre están al pendiente
They are always taken into
de
account
que cuando llegan las lluvias, por ejemplo,
when the rain is
si no
coming,
llegan las lluvias,
and
cuando
if rain not coming, how to deal,
deberían, pues se preocupan, ¿no?
and they how
Entonces,
to deal with it,
entonces
and
pues
they're
con
always
estos
concerned,
rituales y
and they do
peticiones
rituals
ofrendan comida,
and
bebidas,
offerings. They
hacen
prepare food
bailes,
and
cantos
drinks and beverages. They do dances
en estos cuerpos de agua, en los arroyos, en los
in our
pozos,
bodies of
para
water
pedirle, ¿no?
to make sure to
A las
ask
fuerzas de la
to
naturaleza
the forces of
que
nature
envíen la lluvia.
to provide rain
También
for
se
us.
preocupan por mantener limpios
And they're always concerned
nuestros
to keep
espacios, ¿no?
their
Por
spaces
recolectar
clean and collect
la basura que a veces suele
garbage that
hacerlo.
sometimes it's
Em,
left behind.
y bueno, pues creo que los rostros de nuestras abuelas
And the
reflejan
faces of our
muchas
grandparents
cosas, ¿no?
tells us so
Muchos
much,
sentimientos.
a lot of feelings.
Creo que en ellas pues hay,
In them, we find,
sí, toda una serie de
well,
sentimientos, de
a whole
vivencias,
series of feelings, of
de
experiences
cómo, de su resistencia
on
misma
the resistance
de la vida de cada una
throughout life.
y sus bordados, por ejemplo, que ellas mismas elaboran, pues
And how they prepare
son precisamente
their own clothing.
un aspecto de que las identifica, las
The
caracteriza
whole embroidery is
y
what they
donde ellas
represent
mismas
them,
pueden
and it's
plasmar
the characteristics of
su
them.
resistencia, ¿no?
And it
Su
shows the
resistencia
resistance,
histórica,
their historical
donde
resistance,
ellas mismas pueden plasmar
and
también
how they
de cómo ven la
can
vida,
state how they see life,
de cómo es su sentir y su pensar,
how
de
is
cómo
their
es la
feelings,
cosmovisión de cada uno
what is their
de los
cosmovision.
pueblos. Por ejemplo, aquí podemos ver
Here we can
una de
see
mis abuelitas
one of my grandparents,
ellas hacen esos bordados, ¿no?
and she does this embroidery,
Y en estos bordados lo que
and
ellas
here
plasman o hacen
she
en ese
puts
bordado es precisamente
in this embroidery
dibujar estos elementos de la
these
naturaleza,
elements
¿no? Por
of
ejemplo, las
nature,
flores,
the
las
flowers,
aves, los frutos,
birds,
pero
fruits,
también a veces estos bordados,
but
esta
also
imaginación
this imagination they have
se mm, pues va mucho más allá, ¿no? De la
goes
realidad que
beyond
viven ellas y
the reality that they
entonces
live,
empiezan como a conjugar
and we can say we can
estos elementos de
conjugate
la
these
naturaleza con esta
elements of
manera
nature
de
in the
pensar y de
forms
ver la
of
vida
thinking
con
and how
estas
they see life,
deidades del agua, del
the
aire,
water, the
de la
air,
tierra.
the fire, earth.
Entonces, pues nuestras abuelas
So our grandparents,
son personajes
they are
muy valiosos,
characters
¿no?
who are
Para
very
la vida
valuable
de cada una de
to
nosotras,
our life, to each of
porque
our lives,
simplemente
because
han marcado
they have marked
nuestro ser mismo, ¿no? De cada una
our
de
being.
nosotras cuando nuestras abuelas pues nos dan amor, nos dan
They
cuidado,
can show us
nos
love.
enseñan sobre la
They teach
naturaleza,
us
sobre
about
lo que nos
nature,
rodea,
about what
sobre
surrounds us,
desde su vivencia y sus experiencias
from
lo que
what
está
through
bien,
their
lo que
life
está
and
mal.
experiences, it's good and bad,
Nuestras abuelas pues sí han resistido mucho
and
tiempo
they have resisted
a diversas situaciones que las han
different
golpeado, ¿no?
situations what made them
Y a
vulnerable.
pesar de ello pues
And in spite of
siguen
this,
muchas de ellas
they're still here,
luchando día a día
fighting day to day
por, por el cuidado
for
de
the
nuestro hogar,
care
¿no?
of our environment
Por un mundo más
and
justo,
for
más
a world that
abierto.
is more
Y ellas así lo expresan cada vez
more happy. That's how I
que uno
express it.
platica con
Once we
nuestras
talk to
abuelas,
them,
¿no? Nos comparten la alegría de la
they can
vida,
share us
nos
their energy of
comparten
life,
también sus recuerdos bonitos, pero también
their good
muchas
memories.
veces los
They
obstáculos
share with us their
que han
challenges,
enfrentado y
what they
cómo
face,
ellos, ¿no?
and how
se han
they
podido
have
oponerse a esto
overcome this
para que nosotras, las nuevas
so that
generaciones,
we, our generations,
podamos gozar
can enjoy some rights that they did not have, and that we can follow that fight of resistance that they had sustained. So basically, this is what I want to show. Mention that role that our grandmothers have had in our lives,
¿no? Y sobre la importancia que tienen sus
and the
saberes, sus
importance they have, their knowledge that they have, and the roles they have, and that our generations now, we are ones that we can have other spaces like this one, and other spaces like the academy, or find a job, a formal job. So we have in one way or another that responsibility and obligation, so that we have in these spaces the opportunity to talk about the knowledge and the wisdom that they had, to keep fighting for that justice of respect that we want and deserve. And it's something that they were denied, so we gotta fight for them. Fight for that justice of our grandparents and our ancestors. Thank you. Thank you, Jesse, for leading this invocation, calling the energy of our grandmothers, remembering that energy, because they are ahead of us. Our towns of the past, they are ahead of us. They are referrals to us. They are the sun that guide us. So I'll ask you all, if you have put your hands like this, please, to thank the energy of our grandparents, of the generations of our grandparents, of our parents, to thank their strength, their joy, their strong voice from their own original languages, from the paths that they walked, through their hands, with all the calluses they have, their worn faces, because of all the fights they had, because of their wisdom, their knowledge, their way of thinking of those towns, of their ancestors, with the water, wind, fire, and land, are kept alive today. Thank you, grandmother. Thank you, grandfather. Thank you to all the energies that are ahead of us, not only in our towns and our bodies, to our grandmother water, to our grandfather water, to the seeds, to the grandparents forest, to the grandmothers and grandfathers who are not here, who disappeared because of violence, and because of the grandparents with their knowledge, who left behind their sacred knowledge in books, to those who were murdered, to finish with the knowledge and the sciences of our ancestors. Today we say we are here, we are alive, we are present, we are keep honoring and walking in that wisdom to protect. Thank you, grandparents, for being in our hearts. Thank you because you are in the hearts of the earth, and you are in the rivers, you're in the birds, because you are in the hearts of the forest and the mountains and hills, because you're in all our surroundings and in all our daylights and all breakdowns and our dawns. Thank you for all of it. Thank you for your colors. Thank you for your smells, for your loves, your poses and knowledges and silence. Today we think that you are here, that you are my history. They are how I see and how I fit myself and how I live. Here you are, and you're gonna keep on guiding us and be the horizon. Thank you. One more time. One time, two times, three times, four times. And today we embrace ourselves with that energy. Let's hug ourselves with that brace of that knowledge of that grandparents that we knew or might not known, we kissed you symbolically, your hands, and I say thank you, grandparents. And we're going to keep honoring them. And there was energy that they had. And based on that energy, we're going to continue looking at that knowledge and rescuing that knowledge. And this course, we have big task to interpret not what only destroys life, but how to find that reality in that wisdom and accompany this living. So we're going to continue today. We'll ask with the group of Africa to present us their homework. It was something that we started doing last week. And then we'll proceed with Aisha. We'll do 7 minutes so that we can just keep our hearts focused and present our proposals. But let's take advantage of time, please. Welcome.
¿Tiene su presentación o le pido favor a...
Do you have your presentation ready? Or for somebody share the screen for their presentation, please?
Yes, the African team, we are ready.
Sí, ya estamos ya vamos
Muy
a
bien,
proyectar.
perfecto. Excelente, gracias.
Just a minute, my friend Vivian is going to share the screen, then I will present.
De acuerdo, de acuerdo. Esta es la presentación que quedó pendiente la semana pasada.
This is a presentation that was missing from last week, right?
Vamos a presentar el sociograma.
Yes, I can see it. Okay, so can I start presenting or I wait a bit?
Por favor, sí.
Yes, you can begin.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Daisy from the Pokot Indigenous community, as I've always introduced myself, and Poishakwa, that means how are you in my community. So I'm going to present on behalf of African group, and I'll go straight to the first question, which was what was colonization and supposed civilization like for the people of Africa? So as we all know, colonialism is that direct and overall domination of one country by another on the basis of a state power or being in the hands of a foreign power. So when we talk of colonialism in Africa, we can date it back to like 18th century to 1960s, whereby most of the countries in Africa started gaining independence. And this colonialism was impressing itself for the benefit of its own country and people. They came to Africa so that they could benefit, like they had their own personal interests. And it was a turning point of most of our countries in reverting backwards at different development spheres. So it highly works hard in impacting new thinkings that cluster the communities in numerous issues. And this colonialism, I can say, stole our knowledge and it stole our knowledge and painted us with another different thing. And Africa really like profoundly lost most of its things and effects and knowledge and all that. So one of the effects that we saw from colonialism was colonial exploitation, whereby European powers colonized Africa for economic reasons, whereby they were seeking to exploit the vast resources in Africa. We know Africa has been said to be rich with minerals, land, and labor. On minerals, you'll find out that they were coming to Africa. They come make you an ally, or they come and colonize you. They extract all your minerals. They don't even have to pay you. They take your minerals, sell them for their own benefits. They also grabbed lands whereby they were taking the best parts of the countries and all that and made them, we used to call them the White Highlands. We actually have some that have retained the names still now. And another thing they exploited was labor, human labor, whereby they took us Africans as slaves, whereby they used to take us to their countries, make us our laborers. They also made us laborers in our own lands, whereby they came to Africa. An example is, let me use my country, Kenya, whereby they came, planted cash crops, and the people who were being used for cheap labor were Africans. At some point, they were not being paid. It was just pure exploitation. And another thing is it further undermined our collective and communal ownership and brought chaotic individualism. So at first in Africa, we used to own our things and properties communally. Like, let's say, for example, the Pokot, we're living in a certain place. Whatever property, whatever minerals, whatever goods, the people in the land, that is ours. But now when they came, they brought about individualism or capitalism, whereby it made some people, okay, like everyone owned what they thought was theirs. And this made us like, it broke down the unity we had, and it made people start living in classes whereby the people who worked in the White Highlands or were left at the White Highlands were left to be like the bourgeoisies of the time and all that. And they also introduced neo-colonialism, whereby this is what has been conveyed and is still there, where we continue, like we are being colonialists of our own. Like the people who used to see themselves as the rich because they were friends of the colonialists still think or view to be superior than others. So as you can see in the picture below, this is a photo that shows how colonialism turned African countries into the dependency syndrome through loan debts, which are paid through extracting our high value resources and minerals. I think everyone can see the percentages and rates in which like they're exploiting us. The next thing is political domination, whereby African countries were often politically dominated by European colonial powers through military conquest, treaties, and manipulation of existing power structures. So for these, you'll realize that they used to come, they used military force on us. Another thing is we had our own structures as indigenous peoples. For example, as the Pokot or people in Africa mostly were led by elders. We didn't have the chiefs by then, but we had the village elders, the husbands, then the wives, the children. We had a certain hierarchy. But now when they came in, they came and manipulated our system, whereby they started bringing up other things, other forms of leadership, like now the presidents, governors, and all that. Then there's also the treaties. There were several treaties that our people were lured into signing. They didn't know what it meant or anything. They just were told you can sign here, and you could have signed to give out your land. You could have signed to give out the community land. And that's how also us as Africans, it's led to us losing our properties and all that. So we also have the discriminatory policies and practices based on race were widespread under colonial rule and stipulated resistance and independence movements. So I think I've explained and exhausted that. Next is social disruption. So colonization disrupted existing social structures and communities in Africa. As I had said earlier, this is our form of living. This is how we used to stay as Africans, as Pokots, as Maasais. But now when the colonialist came in, he came and disrupted our social structures. And like, for example, using forced labor, land expropriation, the introduction of cash economies, it undermined traditional ways of life. And one thing I can explain in this is women lost their way of, like, women used to do barter trade and all that, but now with the introduction of cash, There's a way we lost our economies and all that and how we used to do things. So additionally, colonial policies often exacerbated ethnic tension and conflicts. Through cultural suppression, European colonizers imposed their cultural values and norms on African societies, often through coercive means. So indigenous languages and cultural practices were suppressed. Just like in the former presentation from Latin America, whereby she said their indigenous languages were viewed to be backward. I think this is one thing that also affected Africa. And as I said, right now I'm working with the youth, and most of them do not know how to speak the indigenous language because they've gone to school, they've learned the colonialists' language, which is English. Kiswahili is now all over Africa. So when you speak to them in the indigenous language, they're going to reply to you in Pokoto or in Swahili or in English, which is very wrong because the indigenous language is Pokot. So there we have a beautiful picture of the Maasai, which shows the Maasai young men during one of the ceremonies, and whereby they are being blessed by milk by elders, which is a significance. Like this is very significant to the Maasai. I hope my friend and I will get like a second to explain more about that. So on question 2, on what impacts did it have on the lives of indigenous peoples and women? So for several years now, indigenous communities have been paying the price of the colonialism in Africa. An example, in many African states, most of the administrative laws and regulations used to date still have colonial elements, and other skills and others still work under their favor. Just as Nai told us, there are some of the rules or laws in their countries, like you'll find out that IPs have not been recognized in a certain region. This is because the laws they are using is still the laws that the colonialists were using. So they were imposed into their administrative. Right now, that's what they're still using. And the IPs don't have any say because these are the laws in the country. This is what we were left by the colonialists. We can't scrap them off. And indigenous peoples are suffering because of that. So the impact of colonization on the lives of indigenous peoples and mostly women in Africa was multifaceted and varied across different regions and communities. So you'll find out that because Africa is wide and we were colonized by different people. For Kenya, we were colonized by the British, an example, Tanzania by the Germans. So what they were doing to us was more of similar, but it came in different phases. So one of the things was displacement and dispossession. Indigenous people often face displacement from their ancestral lands due to colonial expansion and the establishment of settler colonies. As I had told you, they'll come grab our lands and all that. And as we all know, when they take away land, we have to sleep outside and all that. Indigenous women and girls are the ones who used to suffer the most. Because in African countries, for example, more of us indigenous peoples in Africa, even right now, our men and boys mostly tend to stay outside, taking care of cattle, the sheep, the goats, the big herds outside. And for us girls and women, we sleep in the houses, they take care of us. Now, when you come to our land, you displace us, you take our lands, you take our properties, you burn down our houses. We don't have anywhere we go. You'll find out that it's the women and girls who are going to suffer the most. The next thing is on economic exploitation, whereby colonization brought about economic exploitation of indigenous peoples, with their labor being coerced or exploited for the benefit of colonial powers. And women in particular were subjected to harsh labor conditions in agricultural, mining, and domestic work sectors. And they often faced gender-specific forms of exploitation and discrimination, such as unequal pay and limited access to resources and opportunities. You'll find out that when the colonialists came, as I told you, they acquired the white settler farms. They would come to the villages, take out the people who seemed to can work. They also took the women, girls, children, and they were being exploited. You are told to work in a farm from morning till evening. Maybe they don't give you food. You don't have time to rest. That was very bad. Our women really suffered. Our girls suffered. So there was a lot of like labor exploitation, and the girls and women really suffered. Next was social and cultural disruption. Colonial policies and practices disrupted indigenous social structures and cultural practices. Traditional gender roles and power dynamics within indigenous communities were often undermined or supplanted by European norms. Women may have experienced changes in their social statuses and roles within their communities as a result of colonial interventions. Legal and political marginalization, indigenous peoples were often marginalized politically and legally under colonial rule. So you'll find out that, as I had told you earlier, we had our own norms, our own way of living. This was our cultural way, our social way. There's a way we used to do things. But now when the colonialist came in, he brought about a new way of living. He disrupted everything we used to do. Even our rulings, as I told you, politically, we could not again be engaged in decision making as indigenous peoples, the women. The colonialists will go decide, okay, so this territory, this is what I'm going to do, 1, 2, 3, and that is it. We just come, the evictors and all that. So next is health and well-being and resistance and resilience. So colonization had significant implications for the health and well-being of indigenous peoples, including women. European diseases introduced during colonization caused widespread epidemics among indigenous populations, leading to high mortality rates. Okay, there is one belief that we have in Africa. Africans will tell you, for example, there were some diseases like HIV. They didn't exist. Until the colonialists came, they used to, women were being raped at some time. There was a lot of sexual exploitation and all that. They will show you places that all those was happening. And they'll tell you, you know what, for us, there were no such diseases. People used to live so well and all that. But now, after all this came, the so-called civilization and introduction of all that, people moving from the community to urban communities, interaction with different people, being taken to Europe as labor and all that. It led to, like, people interacted, diseases were being spread all over, things that weren't there in the communities. So I think that's all for question 2. The last question was question 3. What mechanisms were used for the dispossession and plundering of knowledge, cosmovision, and their own systems? So there are mechanisms that were used. So one of it was forced assimilation and cultural suppression. This is someone who has power. He has come into your territory. You have nothing. You're used to living in a normal way because this is how we've been living. So one thing that they used was forced assimilation and cultural suppression, whereby colonial powers imposed their own cultural norms, values, and institutions onto indigenous peoples. So one of the things you'll find out that Africans will always tell you is they impose things. For example, Christianity. They had their own ways of worship. They used to talk to their ancestors, like us, the Pokot community. We used to wake up in the morning, we face the east when we are praying. We know we have our ancestors in the rivers. We have to go and pour a libation. We have a mountain that if we pray, we have to face there. We have to get there. But with all these, the mountains are cleared. The rivers are drying up. We were forced into their own ways of worship. We were forced into their own ways of studying. All the things were disrupted. So through forced assimilation, that's one of the mechanisms they used, and it conquered us. That's what I can say at some point. Second was land dispossession and resource exploitation. They took away our land. If they take away your land and your home, there's nothing you can do. Second thing, they've come to your place, they've taken away all the resources that you used to depend on. There's nothing else you can do. So that's a mechanism that really finished us as African. You come to my land, you tell me, you know what, from today, this isn't your land. All these resources in this place, they are mine. That really made us weak, and that's how we were, I can say, not finished, but they really, really undermined and put us low. Next was control of knowledge production and distribution. Colonial authorities often exerted control over the production and dissemination of knowledge within indigenous societies, whereby indigenous knowledge systems, including the oral traditions, rituals, and customary laws, were marginalized in favor of Western scientific knowledge. There's a way, I'll give an example. In all these communities, when it gets in the evening, the girls get with the women into the huts. That's where they're being taught, like, orally. The boys get outside, they sit with the men. their thought, the ways in which they should live. Like the traditional knowledge transfer was really, the transmission was so good. But now they've come here, they're telling us, you have to go to school. And this school, again, not everyone gets there. It's for the chosen few. So like they had control over our knowledge. Our knowledge started disappearing. The way in which they were disseminating knowledge started disappearing. Second is exploitative labor practice, as I had explained earlier. This is a mechanism that really finished us. Someone comes to your village, they take you forcefully, you're supposed to go and work somewhere, you go and work there. The labor that would have helped my community, an example, the men that we used to depend on, our mothers that we used to depend on to feed us, you've taken away our mother. You've taken away the boys and the men who used to take care of the cattle, our mothers who used to feed us. That is labor exploitation. They're not helping us again as a community. They're now helping you in your own favor. Then there's violence and coercion. These colonial powers employed various forms of violence and coercion to maintain control over indigenous peoples and suppress resistance to colonization. There were a lot of people who really resisted colonial power, and the only way the colonialists would use was through violence. This is because they had weapons that they could conquer us so easily. For us, we only had spears, arrows, and all that. You cannot compare yourself. You have an arrow and I have a gun. We cannot compete. I will definitely win over you. So that was one of the mechanisms that they also used. And another one, the last method we found out was intellectual property theft, whereby indigenous knowledge, including traditional medicines, agricultural practices, and ecological knowledge, was often appropriated and exploited by colonial powers without acknowledgement or compensation. Indigenous people's intellectual property rights were disregarded, and their knowledge was commodified for the benefit of colonial and scientific endeavors. Okay, I can give a very local example. All of us we are indigenous women and girls. We have our own indigenous medicines. For example, the aloe vera. In us, the Pokot, the aloe vera really means a lot to us. But right now, you'll find out that there are people who have come to the community. They tell you, we want you to sell us this aloe vera. They really buy it at a very, very, very small price. Yet we know they're going to modify it and sell it at a very, very high price. That is like intellectual property theft. You are stealing from us indirectly. You're giving us very little. At some point, you don't even give us anything. That's one of the mechanisms they used. So the last is, you can see this picture there, 2 pictures actually. Those are indigenous ways of preparing milk preservation by using traditional herbs and children taking blood as food. For us, taking blood and mixing with milk, that's very good food. And we also use herbs to preserve milk and all that. So in conclusion, colonization and the imposition of supposed civilization had far-reaching and long-lasting effects on the people of Africa, shaping the continent's political, social, and economic landscape in profound ways. Colonization had profound and often detrimental effects on the lives of indigenous peoples and women in Africa, impacting their socio-economic, cultural identity, and well-being. However, it is important to recognize the agency and resilience of indigenous communities and women in the face of colonial oppression. Thank you.
Gracias al equipo de África. Realmente de una manera muy clara, igual que América Latina, nos presentan de manera precisa,
A
contundente.
very precise way they show us how the
A
colonization
precise and
was lived
clear
in their
way how
territory.
colonization has happened and how
So there is a continuous
neocolonization
impact
is impacting
that has
women
women
and
on.
children today, peoples today of America, Africa, and Asia. Thank you so much. Now we ask, because of time, to our sisters of Asia to share your reflection on colonization and the impact of the knowledge and the science of peoples and the impact on the territory and body of women. Welcome.
Just a moment, please. Oh. Oh, we have a text. Sorry.
Muy bien, gracias a ustedes.
No,
No problem. Take your
sorry.
time.
Sorry, we have a PowerPoint. It was not uploaded, but we have a PowerPoint. Can I share the screen, please? Yeah. So it's faster. There. Can we use this? Yeah. Oh. Let me let me do it creatively also. 30 seconds for this. So colonization tried to break that spirit of freedom and sacred breath. So colonization was occupation and imposition of Euro-Western civilization and patriarchal worldviews over the existing life ways of peoples in Asia, breeding discrimination on account of the superiority and supremacy of colonizers' civilizations. As experienced in Bangladesh, it was colonized by the British East Indian Company, then ruled by Pakistan, and Myanmar by the British and Japanese colonizers, also in the Philippines by Spanish, Japanese, and American colonizers, and in Indonesia by the Dutch colonizers, until it gained independence in 1948. Nepal was never colonized, wow, but was largely influenced by the British Empire in India. This was done through religion, education, and science, while violently suppressing indigenous worldviews and imposing supremacy and superiority. New laws on ownership of land were imposed, such as the Regalian Doctrine, or the ownership of the King of Spain over the whole country, Public Land Act during the American period, and new laws on ownership of properties as well as relationships were modeled after the hierarchical structures of the colonizers. Ananya, will you share this? Sure. Okay. Ananya, may I call on my colleagues?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Tom, this is not my present.
Oh. Okay. Oh, it's still mine. Sorry. And with the colonizers' materialistic worldview, there was massive extraction and destruction of natural resources for gold in Myanmar and the Philippines, stones in Indonesia, going to Netherlands, oil in Myanmar as well, timber, fish, spices, and the promotion of large-scale monocrop agriculture plantations like for palm, coconut, vegetables. Labor was exploited as very cheap and forced labor or outright slavery. Existing civilizations before the colonial periods were considered pagan, uncivilized, unscientific, superstitious, inferior, and dirty. Many lands and lives were destroyed to establish new town centers where trade, religion, and government was controlled by the colonizers, while indigenous ways of life disintegrated. The divide between majority, minority, urban, and rural became the norm, where civilization and progress was concentrated in the town centers, while rural areas were neglected and considered as resource base for exploitation. So very similar with Africa and Latin America. So, oh, Ananya, is this yours?
Yes, this is mine.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So when the colonizers come to Asia, they first did they grab indigenous people's land because as peoples got separated from their land and ancestral territories even forced them to be marginalized. Even when they are separated for indigenous peoples, they are break their social culture, even the political culture, their self-determination system. I will give an example about our community. Before we are living together, we are practice our own self-determination. like Nokma. We call it Nokma. After when the colonizer come and separated us from our ancestral land, we are not practicing our previous self-determination system. So when we are evicted from our land, our language are also disappearing. Some words we cannot use it right now. Even when they are pushing indigenous women as a slavery work, they are act that indigenous women cannot cultivate their traditional jum. We call it jum, like paddy, grow up paddy. We cannot do it. In 1951, they are decided that we cannot cultivate paddy. It's very important for our ritual system. Like we are used to cultivate our own paddy. It's used for our rituality, but we cannot do it. Even though the Bangladesh are still following the 1970 and forest.
Aline, ¿y si le escribes?
Podríamos aprovechar, digamos, porque como con Anaya tenemos un poquito de complicación en la conexión, si alguien del grupo la ayuda, ¿es posible para continuar con la
We have a bit of an issue with Ananja's connection. We can't hear her. Can anybody from the group help her so that we can continue with the presentation, please?
Okay, I'll take over. Can you hear me?
Perfecto.
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Okay. What impact did it have on the life of the indigenous peoples and women? So it impacts on the indigenous spirituality and cultural expressions. It also indigenous knowledge were suppressed violently, creating deep intergenerational trauma and the cycles of cultural violence in individuals, in their families, communities, as well as nations. And then, for instance, there is also still burning of indigenous healers, stigmatized as a witches, persecution of as a rebellions, Indios, desecration, sacred lands, and symbol, as well as sexual violence. And then the other one is a loss of self-determination and autonomy. We cannot have a self-determination. Even the UNRIP mentioned about self-determination, but in reality, there is no self-determination for indigenous peoples. Next is the marginalization. We've been marginalized, we are getting poor because there's no access to the education, to work, loss of our self-confidence, we have trust issues with the others, and then the rise of inferiority because the majority consider us as inferior. And then next is the widespread of rape, sexual slavery of women, in terms of, it could be like a human trafficking, women in trafficking, it could be women working as in domestic, working in domestic, in the domestic, violence in domestic or the house. This is kind of the slavery things. And then treatment of women as inferior than men. Women is always considered as the second subject, yeah, second citizens. And then unpeopling the population as well as force of birth control. Man is always who will decide how many children in the family, what kind of contraception used by the women, and then we are considered as a traditional people in the society. Next is intensified intertribal conflict and armed resistance. So there is the policy of the government that they want to make a tribe fight with the tribe. Indigenous people tribe with indigenous people over the land resources or environmental resources. So they make situation like that, yeah, that we are fighting each other. And then the rise of in criminal offense and incarceration of indigenous peoples. So indigenous people, if they protest over their land, they always been sent to the jail without proper state of the proper state of the criminal justice system. So if every single time if we protest against the government, we will face with the jail or sentence. And then spread of poverty, hunger, and diseases. Yeah, because we don't have the access to health, access to public health, no insurance, health insurance. So that's why it impacts to our health and hunger, also diseases. And then next, alcoholism and domestic violence. As I mentioned before, many women become like a slave in their house, in their own house. Women has no right to say something, and then increasing numbers of domestic violence because of for instance the trend after pandemic COVID-19, there are so many layoffs, no jobs, so it will be the burden to the women as well. And then next, low literacy in Western educational standard and loss of indigenous language and scripts, because as there are some emerging of the international language, right? Mandarin, Spanish, French, English, and other national language, but there's never been thinking, yeah, that indigenous language will be dismissed, will be dismissed, because it is considered as a traditional language, and then no hope for this language. There no school, no curriculum regarding indigenous language. And then next, imposition of national standards that are inappropriate and irrelevant to indigenous peoples. So the government makes standardized, make the standardized that indigenous peoples are always left behind. Yeah, they make uniformity that the people in the public school, for instance, indigenous people should wear proper dress, no tattoos, no symbol of the indigenous. So this is like a standard, what we mean standardization in the public schools. Next, okay, is that me? Oh, okay, I will continue because okay, what mechanism were used for the disposition and plundering of knowledge, cosmovision, and their own life system? We divide into 7, yeah. One is the indoctrination that Western education, science, and religion is superior, while indigenous knowledge is superstitious, unsatisfied, barbaric, uncivilized. So it's always comparison between the standardization, the good things with the bad things. And the second one, establishment of institutions that ensure loyalty and allegiance to colonial paradigma, right? So there is again this is always top down. The decision always top down without any involvement of the indigenous people's voice. They establish institutions that and should ensure loyalty. The third one, use of brutal force and suppressions of resistance. If there's any protest, demonstration, we will face with the criminal sentence and penalization. And then for one, sexual violence and slavery on women. Women is always, this is in the form of women in trafficking, as well as migrant women, female migrant workers. So this is one of the examples. And then imposition of capitalist market system. This make every single they try to introduce the new jobs, new plantations, new agriculture to indigenous land. This is the way that they said, oh, mining is very good for you because it's creating the job. And then palm oil plantation is good for you because it's creating the job. Something like that, yeah. Cacao plantation is good for indigenous people. While it will dismiss the indigenous agriculture. And then the next, imposition of national laws and policies on land, identity, administrative jurisdiction. So while in fact, indigenous have their own law, what it called indigenous law. So it will be, beaten by the indigenous of imposition of national laws. There is no recognition of the indigenous land over the state land, something like that, yeah. And then exploitation of local tradition that perpetuated inequality, supervience, and passivity, and as well as exclusion. So this also they consider that all local is not good, yeah, for competition for the global market, for instance. They always make inequality in the position because as I mentioned, in public school, I can give actual example because indigenous children, they should, for instance, should not use a symbol of indigenous in the school, something like that. And then next, this is the end of our presentation as in Asia Group. We have highlight about the lessons in the context of the colonization impacted to indigenous women. So one is colonization. Colonization has great influence on the lives and rights of indigenous women, even until recently. As we can, our group mentioned about the issue of the impacts to the indigenous women. So the second one, the lesson is the bad norms and values of colonialism are also not lost. They're still there in the new phase, yeah, with the new phase, such as imposing, underestimating, insulting, degrading, and making people marginal. And the third one, the values of new form of colonialism can only be fought against with education, awareness, and joint struggle of women. We cannot do that in silo because we fight against the state, the businesses, those who had the indigenous women. And then 5, colonization has not totally destroyed the spirit of the land and indigenous people. This continues to inspire resistance and regenerative movements. Yeah, the more we are being suppressed, the more we are fighting for that. This is the end of the Asia Group. Thank you so much for your attention.
Gracias también, Asia, la fuerza.
Thank you, Asia, for your strength and how strong your presentation was. And I think you close with something very important. When there's more repression, when there's more colonization, when there's more oppression and violence, more strength and resistance we have. I think that is not just words, but real facts. And we are showing that today, that we are here joined together to recover or to retrieve our own system, our own knowledge, and not from that death culture that has been imposed on us, but from a culture of life. And something we do confirm is that how colonization came charged with a death culture, based on a culture of death, based on a disrespect of life and to the ways of the peoples, to the way of life of indigenous communities. And that's why we say that colonization is no more than racism and patriarchy and the disposing of peoples. Those are the bases of colonialism. And I'm just trying to recover what we talked about last week, how the political, social, cultural, and financial disposal or disposing of colonization and how it destroyed our territory, not just the flora and fauna, but also bodies of women and men. But the impact was even greater on the bodies of women that were used as things. Being raped, one of the ways to control and dominating women, violating the physical, spiritual, and emotional integrity and mind integrity of women. Their energy, their energetic integrity was violated as well. And recognizing how colonization is not separated from that Eurocentric and North-centric research process. And when the search was for destroying this system of knowledge, the knowledge and the ways of life of indigenous communities. And we need to have that very present because it was one of the less visible disposals or the less visible ways of appropriation. They took our territory, they took our natural resources, but they also took our cosmovisions, our cosmo knowledge and our ways of life, our science. And even harder, they made us believe that those are not knowledge, that they are, as you said, that it's not knowledge, that it's not science that we have, but superstition, elements that are part of a people and their beliefs, but we are not recognized as peoples with our own science. So I won't repeat what I said yesterday, but I just wanted to make sure that we highlight how it's separated, how colonization brought separation. It de-articulated body, energy, and land, because then it takes away the significance of the world, because the being in sync with the cosmos and the world, they're not interested in saying that, we have our grandmother moon, then to cut a tree we have to ask permission. Oh, that's not economy, that's a waste of time, that doesn't generate capital. They're not interested that we with time listen to the grandfathers and the grandmothers. They were useful when they were young, when they were cheap labor to exploit, but they're no longer useful. They should be discarded, just like our knowledge. And that separation, we have been dragging it with us. How do you create a separation from religion and metaphysics? And you present it very clear in your presentation. On one side, we separate science, morality, and a morality that is linked to a normative right only, science to one truth only, which is the truth of the North, of West, from a white perspective, from a death culture, and art, only one art that is authentic and beautiful. Our art, it's artisanal. All that focus marks the division and marks how they impose systems into our peoples. That separation from these three spheres talks to us about the problems of justice and moral that are developed based on a Western moral concept, even after they have stolen knowledge of other cultures that they then impose as our own, as a single judicial system, a norm, a Western norm to solve any injustices. The problem of knowledge is only solved with a discourse, a scientific discourse based from a North-centric or Eurocentric focus. The problems of taste, of beauty are only solved with the critic of art from their perspective, because we don't have art, because we only have artisanal ways. And all these problems are solved institutionalizing, moralizing structures from that perspective, a scientific discourse based on one only truth and reason that takes away and casts aside our knowledge and a criticism of art from their perspective, North-centric and Eurocentric perspective, casting aside what originary peoples and millenary cultures of the world have. It's not one culture. We have different millenary cultures, science, moral, and practice from a universal law, rationality of concepts from an objective science, aesthetics from a universal art. The rest is not art. And it's all subject to the control of specialists, specialists in moral and science and aesthetics and arts. And the European ideals of modern. And it's all based on a universal establishment. And that's not modern ways, that is savagery, that is getting stuck. And the European concept of modernism, and it's articulated and it's all established based on the colonialism of world, from the Western world or European world, conceived with what is modern, what is advanced, what is civilized, progress, what is developed, what moves forward, growth, and the others, us, the indigenous and originary community, and the rest of the cultures of the planet are not important. Since we are considered subdeveloped, we're considered not civilized, and this Western world, North and Eurocentric, with a makeup from colonial times, establish a way of life of the world that is imposed and that is established in our territories. Like you said very clearly, annulling our systems, our food systems, annulling our agricultural system and our systems of justice and our systems of organization, of health and organization, our relationship with the earth, with the water, with the natural resources, annulling all our ways of living life in this world view, annulling our science, annulling our knowledge, our strengths and our ways of life, our language, our clothing, and the way we do things. That's why the different cultures were considered non-civilized. We're the ones that are the third world. We're behind. And this invasion and colonization, because the modernizing and an institution of colonization and the language and ways of life of those people, meaning that millenary cultures and originary peoples, they are imposed a modernized system and an organization based on that colonial system. They impose knowledge, language, and memories that are unique, and they annul the knowledge, the language, and the memories that are collective, the stories. So when they narrate the stories of our peoples, have not been us or our grandfathers or grandparents, nor our ancestors, nor those who have been who have been violented, who have been subject to violence, because that was their tool: repression, fear, disposition, disease, hunger, bestemicide. That has been their tools. And when we see how the people invaded were denied with rights, we don't tell our story. The colonizer tells the story. The oppressor tells the story. And we can say here that all the cultures and peoples and territories, present and past, are condensed in one narrative, the only narrative, their perspective. So when you go look for bibliography to support your research, you have to understand what focus and from what point of view is this being supported, from the culture of death or from the culture of life. And so our stories, when we look for books, they are written by invaders, by perpetrators. And Europe is or has been, and now North America as well, simultaneously the geographical center of the temporal movement. That's the unique science, unique capital, unique knowledge, unique language that are imposed in people denominated by them third worldly. The invasion and colonization of the American continent in Europe, Africa, and Asia is based on two particular processes made up of history: modern and colonial ways of the world colonialism that continues through neocolonialism, and a process that ends in the 18th and 19th century for the first time, when you organize a space and time, all the cultures of the planet, present and future, in a great big narrative. In this narrative of Europe, where they have been the geographical center of the culmination of the movement, meaning we say Eurocentric or North-centric, because they are considered the only centers of power and knowledge and science and economy of the supposed development and progress that we know has failed, because now we see global warming, we see all the crisis of humanity, the deterioration of culture and life. And the Spanish conquistadors, with them, you start the massive creation of a discourse and the differentiation between Indians and Europeans from a privileged position of power, meaning whoever writes the story is whoever has the power. They have the privileged position. And we are subject and dominated and invisibilized from this story. We don't write the story. I'm going to go pretty quickly in this part. And in this universalization that is imposed, because they don't recognize other cultures, millenary cultures, and knowledge, and everything here is subject to private individual property. Because in this establishment, individualism prevails, and all that territory is made private in the hands of colonizers that today continue being property of the richest families that have become rich through disposing properties and exploitation, stealing, and looting the riches of this world, because it's illicit. They have been the result of murder of all the peoples of Asia and Africa. And this is established as a system of economic systems, because they start affirming the right of the oppressor. You deny the rights of colonized and invaded and impoverished peoples. They confirm and affirm the right of the colonizer. They deny the collective right because of an individual right. They are not interested in this town, this territory, this people's this territory was built, was given in life. Thanks to the life and the walking of ancestors. And they are disposed and they become individual right. You lose the right of collective rights of territories.
The Riches of Adam Smith says, there's no status or sovereignty or republic at all. With this scope of judicial provision of the indigenous people, we're talking about legal deprivation and its wealth of nations may be alleged by American lands even for judicial purposes. They are worth more as a right to deprive of rights than the particular nation itself. So there is no status in society, no sovereignty, or no rights. As simple as that. That's how they've seen the natives in North America. And that's how many have seen it around the world. The effect of universalism is not the universalization of law. It's not on the collective side, the acknowledgement of all cultures. It's more of an enthronement of the legal universe itself, with radical expulsion of any other. The other knowledges, those are gone. So we are subordinate position. The indigenous person is in a subordinate position. They have no place at all. And they're completely abandoned their customs and undo their communities in order to be integrated into the only constitutionally conceivable world of law. This means how are the origin towns nowadays? We're moving according to what's given, to one system, to one absolute truth, to one capitalist economy that ingrains and sustains racism, exploitation, marginalization. And we as original towns are not willing to do this. We're not going to stop being. We love identity. We love our knowledge. Although we were born in colonized towns, we believe in our ancestors' laws and customs. What does it mean to be original nowadays, original people nowadays? What does that mean for boys and girls, for the women? What does this mean for the grandparents? Just like Jesse was saying today, they have to resist racism, violence, because of their way of being, because they're speaking their own tongue. Sexual exploitation victims, migration, impoverishment, diseases like HIV, like you said, in Asia and Africa, to be able to coexist, to resist the system that is not ours, that is based on customs of death. We're standing, like Aisha was saying, to more violence. That's the resilience that we have. And more determination to sustain ourselves, to stand up. What's Eurocentrism and colonialism? It's essentially stating that the cultural and social values of Western Europe constitute universal patterns or models. This is the only truth. This rules the world. this annuls all ways of being, all the systems, or beliefs. There's only one civilization. There are millennial civilizations from the past, that has connection with the earth, with the wind, with the fire, with the land, with nature. The other system is based on individualism, on exploitation, on destruction of life. And it's sustained in on breaking on knowledge, taking away that knowledge. And they're seen from the European point of view, where the advantages and benefits for the Europeans and their descendants are achieved at the expense of other cultures. For example, today, you talk about the towns being crop cacao, put your sugar cane, plant your oils, because this is what the European culture is asking for. At what cost? Are we going to be getting rid of our species? Are we going to destroy our lands? Are they going to loot to get lithium and other minerals? Why? For the growth of their own territories. That's how their territories grow. That's how their civilization grows. That's how their richness grows. At the expense of our strength, of our land, of the sufficient of our lands, of our people, from other cultures, based on the colonization of the New World, where those interests come to mind. In modernity, we could see I was born when Europe was able to constitute itself with a unified ego, exploring, conquering, and colonizing an otherness, and gave it back an image of itself. The white thought, the white way of thinking. Those who know everything, the governments, the ones who are leading the way. The other towns, they don't know anything. So what's Eurocentrism? It's a fallacy of developmentalism consisting in thinking that the pattern of the European development must be followed by all other cultures. You are third world. One day you might reach the first world. That's a capital model that we live in, where there is inequality, where we're exploiting, where there is injustice, where we're taking advantage of Mother Nature. We're trying to exploit in conditions of commerce that are not just, because this is not the prices that are put by the ones who produce. Those who are buying and managing the capital is them, and this is a key point here. When they talk about development, when they talk about sustainable development and growth, because that's what they're being told. That's the thinking that we need to follow. I am here, but tomorrow you'll probably be here, based on the oppression of others. But we'll never get there. We'll never get that progress that they want to tell us. Because as original people, we don't understand those systems and that culture of death. We are here to live our culture of life, live in justice and equality, respecting the natures, the rivers, the ocean, listening to the original the languages, to live with our grandparents, living with dignity of women and men, that they are writing from their own realities, that they are recovering their ancestors' history, where they have their own economies, which is not based on individualism. And also, we're talking about the model that is becoming more unbiased way of thinking. There is only one personality. There's only one system. There's a certain epistemology that is symbolic. There's only one way of thinking. Only one scientific model that we must adapt. Any other thing does not exist. And that's how the world today is trying to follow that model, which it does not allow of the world, of the culture, of everyone. It doesn't allow that we are present, for leaving us for us to write, for us to pronounce our way of thinking from our own science, from our own languages. And this is why it's a challenge in our studies. It's not about connecting writings under this thinking, from this epistemology. We want to write from our own cosmovision and way of thinking, from our knowledge as women of original indigenous towns, where we have our own cultures, trying to live through a system, through a modern system, a capitalist system. And we gotta stay rooted to ourselves, with our own philosophies, with our own sciences, from our own languages. And that's a challenge. That's the challenge of our research. Do not repeat writings or ideas. Let's get rid of the sciences. Because as indigenous people, we gotta say that this model doesn't work. It does work, based on how we use it. Science is not neutral. There is an intention to it, an economic and political issue. We can use that science to recover our own beliefs. And we got to recreate and recover our own cosmos knowledge, just like Trevor was mentioning before. And it's not like a grandma was saying, it's not even the past. We do not want to go to the past. But with that energy of the past, of that knowledge, on those roots and those philosophies, from our own systems and sciences and ways of being and how we see the world, among ourselves, we can provide this knowledge and rescue all of this. Because there is a philosophy from the advice of their grandparents. So that's how we're going to unload that system that is so colonialistic, that is being imposed on us. And we're open to the academic side, to the original. Wait a moment. I want to leave here my reason and objectivity. Here's my thinking, here's my work, here's my cosmovision. This is something that we gotta live. We don't learn it, we live it. So, and we gotta get rid of that colonization and break that matrix of coloniality, that continuum within neocoloniality and coloniality. We see it in three matrix. Colonialism, what is? It's a political fact and a specific historical moment of political subjugation of people in the world. And that's something that the Central America team was talking to us earlier today. That's what they lived, our ancestors did. And that in one way or another, it lives in us. And we're going to carry that history. We're not going to carry that pain, that historical burden. Because like we said, if you want to fly, you got to let go of those loads. And coloniality is the colonization process, which remains and invades all areas of public and private life. In the time of the colonial of the violence that we lived, bloody, it finished with life of the original towns. But we're still here. We're still present in this moment. And coloniality is that part, that process of colonization that invades all the spheres of power, of knowledge, of being of the original towns. And there is a cross-cutting theme that goes to those who are called colonized, those who are impoverished, because we can't get rid of that mentality. We are survivors. We are daughters and sons of the land, of the fire and wind. And we're here with dignity. And with that coloniality, centers itself in power, in the systems of knowing, and how the system works, in that science that we were raised under, in that language that was imposed into us. One language. For Africa and Asia, it might be in English. For us, it was Spanish, based on their own languages, based on their own tongues. And the coloniality of being, that is the one that's in their interior, in our bodies, where we say, many were ashamed of getting to know themselves. Many people in our town are ashamed to say that I'm Mayankachi, or that I'm Asai, or that I'm Una. I am ashamed because my culture cannot survive. They're ignorant. They can't do anything. That's what the history is telling us. That's how the people that colonized us wrote their history, because of their political and economic points of view. But when we start to awake our own identity, here we go, wait a moment. That coloniality of the being, of the power of being, we gotta clean it. And we gotta be decolonized in that idea. From our own point of view, family point of view, as a community, as a town. And then we have the colonial matrix of power. It's a mechanism of management, of control and exploitation that crosses all historical ages from the 16th century onwards. Although this matrix was founded, created, and managed in the West, from their own strength, from their own wisdom, from their own philosophies and their sciences, from their territories, they began implanting fear. Because that economical system comes from that power. Because we are going to recover that presence, that ownership without violence. And that's the balance of the cultural life. And that's what this matrix talks about. It's already in the judicial world, in the structures, in the justice structures, in the world. It's in the economic system. It's in the political system. It's in the position of one culture, based on individualism.
Y estamos aquí porque la hemos logrado.
And we need to break that barrier. And that's why we're here. We were educated in schools, in universities, in centers of studies where this is colonial power, and this is religion sometimes, that Christianity, individualistic. But here we are with our dignity. We are eating from that model. And by saying that this is that we're following that chain, and other ones that are just around the world. In Central America, and Africa and Asia. It's there when we have that mega powers to invade our lands, hydroelectric. The towns are against because we say no because there's ways that we have of feeding, and they're trying to invade territories, damage the life of species, of feeds, of seeds, of our grandparents. And here's what we say. This matrix, although it was created and managed in the West, today is disputed by the United States, China, and India, and Russia, who hold control of it. And with that matrix, they have that power based on that culture of power. They do not recognize the strength and the science of others. I'm trying to go a little faster here. And this matrix starts in 16th century, like I said, with a commercial expansion of the Atlantic and the invasion colonization of Americas. And it comes that patriarchy operates as a central principle of authority control, being the theological knowledge its pillar of social organization. It operates at the level of government, one God, white, man, dominator, and operates in the whole world through sociality, gender, ways of being, and the different systems that we have, and ways of understanding the way we do. And this colonial matrix of power is articulated with a type of economy that we talk about neoliberalism, which destroys along its way other existence forms of economy, and at the same time shapes the world that we know today as modernity, which along the way destroys other worlds and social structures that are not profitable or sustainable. And that's how we build this. The path is destroying everything, other cultures, others' way of thinking that are not sustainable, to ensure other ways, the impact that it's having on Mother Nature, on what we call today climate change, or El Niño and La Niña, which are just the results of that colonial matrix and that capitalistic system. In what territory? The water of the world, the principles of the world, especially in territories from Africa, Asia, where they have maintained, they've taken care of the earth. How does this millennium matrix come? And how to talk with racism, but the patriarchy and the capitalism and the regulatory principles of the colonial matrix on all of these three bases. And here we say the economy is related to the exploitation of mines, plantations, massive land appropriation, largest land appropriation seen in the history of mankind. During the colonization and the neo-colonization, where they are taking people out of the territories in the name of progress, taking over rivers, of extracting plants, and other ways of getting rid of people. The control of the resources implies that nature, which is sacred and communal use for the indigenous people, is transformed into private property. In one way or another, these four spheres operate today according to the historical context. And this has four ways on this rhetorical of modernity, coloniality, related of hope and salvation. and the hopes of salvation, that one day we'll be free. This salvation, we talk about the 16th century, 17th century, by conversion in these centuries. Forget your system and your cosmovision as towns and convert to Christianism, to that one religion, to that one way of thinking, of relating to a supreme God, to that patriarchy, authority. Then we have the 17th and 18th centuries. We talk salvation by the civilization. Those ignorant people, those polytheist believers, they're gonna be saved if they transform, if they learn the languages, if they learn the systems, if they learn our science, if they leave aside their system. And then we have salvation by development and modernization, when the United States took control between 50s and the 70s. Let's be modern. Let's sell our labor. Let's take that private property. Individualism. Let's be modern. And this is how they battled the original people. And then we have the new form of economic and social salvation by neoliberalism and market democracy, a contemporary version of developmentalism. And this is a rhetoric of the modernity colonially related to hope salvation. And this Eurocentrism is based on racism, patriarchy, and capitalism, and anthropocentrism. The center of the world is a man. Water, the fire, the feeling, those elements they do not feel. They're just resources. Therefore taking control over. In capitalism, we talk about accumulation of richness. No matter what, even we're ending on life of the original towns. And then patriarchy, the system of exploitation of the women, of men. And this is position that dominates, that submits the others, forgetting that at least in our civilization, they have their people, we have the agents. You were born to be a person, worthy, happy. Even if you came with a penis or a vagina, you were born to be happy. You have the permission to live. You have the right to live and to learn and to be in harmony with nature and with everyone around you. Of being a man or a woman, and then being submitted as a woman to the power of the privilege of man. All of this based on this matrix. And the world history from the European perspective. And European mindset and knowledge as universal. And then we talk about European education, religion, health, and way of life as universal. When I was looking today about how difficult it was to recover information, why so many? Because of the colonial system. All of these structures were structures that were based on this statement within one system of justice. So these are rules that were imposed on, that they will not acknowledge the justice that we hold, and not even the rights of women. And then the other one is the epistemological coloniality of homogenic knowledge thinking that is capable of solving all social problems regarding or having arising in other contexts. And we're talking about being mainstream in all areas of life. So we're talking about that coloniality That way of thinking, how is it imposed? In education. In the education that is implemented in educational systems, in the academia, in health, that homogenic belief and hope, in culture, in law, and economics, and politics. There's a different way of thinking imposed in the context of our realities. So that coloniality comes from that homogenic thinking. The only one that's going to solve this, in reality, that's not what happens. So, what happens? Let's just talk a little bit about this, about these new pandemics that we have. What happened to the educational system of the world? Based on this science, universal science, what happened? People died. Somebody mentioned even the rich people die. And in the top of the kind hospitals, because it's not preventive, because it only heals the body. It doesn't heal the soul, the energies. It doesn't hold the ruptures that we have, because it's at a system that doesn't take into account all these things into, because we're not the only ones. In these millennial cultures, we have a health for life. Why did the system collapse? Based on vaccines, on batteries, oxygens and stuff, because they move capital. How would they get rich? During the pandemic, ask yourself in the system, how our towns in Latin America and Guatemala, we saw the corruption of the system that was selling life to towns, buying vaccines, making business, stealing the resources. So this health system, this coloniality fails. Why? Because the towns were kept alive. The original towns were, through their millennial cultures. We can do an analysis of that. How it's not the same to talk about laws and justice. To apply a law, we can go into jail in the territories without being just. Is that just? To go to jail, so people have to migrate because of the rights being destroyed of women and towns getting taken out of the territories and getting backed up through that system that they have. The transgressors, those who are taking against life, those genocides, how can they do it? Because they are under that system, on that coloniality, on that transverse. I'm going to stop here that moment. I know there's a lot that we can talk about. I know we have a lot of things to discuss. We're going to close with this last one. And we're going to talk about the political function of this epistemological coloniality. And it is basic to understand this homogenic thinking in a ways of research in this homogenic thinking, which is based on the science, it's unique science, based on reason. What does it bring? What do you think it does? When we talk about this coloniality, the extermination of the being and the knowing and doing of other cultures and people. That's important. They're going to get rid of. They're going to take control, domination of the culture. Those anthropologists of the past, sociologists who come and they're being paid by the World Bank to loot on that knowledge of health so they can sell it to those companies. We're going to sell them at a high cost. That's not only extermination, but the looting of that knowledge, of that science.
Europa sobre las otras culturas y pueblos.
The other thing is the control and domination by Europe over the other cultures and peoples, of economy, culture, politics, laws, and social systems, and the exploitation of other peoples and cultures economically and culturally. And these are the colonialization, the invasion, and plundering of people who are still existing. Even 600 years from now, it still happens in our days, in our territories. And this coloniality in 3 dimensions. Legitimation of hegemonic powers based on domination, exploitation, and conflict. So we have that control, that power, the economy control, and that's illicit. It was done through exploitation. Today, those big families exploit the world, and they take the generations, the pain, violence, the death of species, of natural resources. So they have a culture of death. That's the system. And this is based on the control of power, of economy, on authorities, in the control of gender and sexuality, in the control of knowledge and subjectivity, on the knowing, how we feel. That's what we call as coloniality of power. How's the coloniality of the being happen? In the colonized individuals and in the forms of production and reproduction of symbolic imaginaries that give rise to the development of the subjects, including their identity. I reproduce and deny these examples. I deny, I'm ashamed of the barriers of my languages. I deny the knowing of medicines. I laugh at the wisdom of the elders because that's going back. That's not progress. So I'm going to start internalizing this identity. I'm ashamed of my identity. And it's adult-centric coloniality. It's based on adults, of the man, where the knowledge of the elders is forgotten. So the children do not matter either. Coloniality in that being, in assuming, naturalizing, and internalizing historical oppression. And we're victims. And that's the hardest thing. When we feel victims to this system, we're no longer victims. Let's recover the resilience of the grandparents. In a silence, we start meeting and we denied this coloniality of being. Let's look how it happens in our territories. How colonized is my being, my way of thinking, my identity, and then the coloniality of knowledge that goes through all the power relations and based on the ethnic and epistemic superiority of Europeans over indigenous people.
Superiores al llegar a nuestros territorios en África, en Asia y en América, nos vieron salvajes.
They were superior to us. They saw us as beasts and inhumans, of second-level categories without rights. And they looked at us as animals. Because even for animals for them do not have life. But for us they do. But how is that the way it was seen? And they denied, they burned, they murdered, and silenced with no power or utterance. They destroyed centers of knowledge of the towns and imposed and implemented their own. And we were looking at the bottom. How we people who don't know, without knowledge, denying our systems, our being, and they were just looked as objects of communities of analysis, key informants, those that don't know, that come to the territories without asking permission. I get my PhD, I get my studies, my master's, I get the knowledge that I need. They are just objects, silenced, without being able to present themselves, without their philosophies. And then we have that epistemic position implemented from homogenic feminism, both from the Western modernity. There is a way of being that defines the way that women should behave because of the modernity, of the Western modernity. And that's how it's built. The coloniality of knowledge is built with that universities, in the investigation centers that sustain the sciences, to loot. And that's where we only are. We're only objects. We're just here for analysis, to be analyzed. We're going to stop right here to think. I hope you're not falling asleep on me. I hope it wasn't that heavy. We're going to have 2 comments perhaps to close and then take the break. There's other elements, but because of time, we're going to go there. If you have any comments? If you fell asleep, I'm so sorry. You have 10 minutes to get some coffee. Any questions or comments that you might have based on what we've seen so far? Key takeaways that you might have. Was everything clear? All right. If there are no comments, Doman, you want to comment?
Yeah. I'm thinking I think it's a long way to have come to this point to articulate how colonization has been affecting us. And it also it's a long way still to break that silence. Yeah, I'm thinking, because I'm doing also my research on indigenous knowledge on mental health, it would have been way lot easier if I was doing it with FIMI, with these perspectives and framework that we are talking about, than trying to do it within the university that wants to extract the knowledge but does not recognize the perspective or the paradigm that we need to use, and we need to use in order to be faithful to the indigenous knowledge that they're so willing to also get to know. Yeah, so it's still a long way to go. Yeah, that's my reflection.
Gracias. Está Vivian, que tiene también una participación.
Vivian, you can talk.
Yeah, so for me, what I can say is I have learned a lot. There are some terms that I got to learn today for the first time. The terms that are used to refer colonialism, like these terms, epistemological, there is hegemonic feminism, such terms. I hadn't used them before, but I'm glad I have learned them. Thank you.
Muy bien, muchas gracias a ustedes. Vamos a
Thank
tomar
you. We're going to take this 10 minutes
de tiempo
of the
para
time,
volver.
and then we'll come back.
Agradezco también
I want to thank you all to be here.
que les quede de reflexión.
Just as a reflection on what framework of the epistemology are we going to present our research.
Desde ese enfoque de la
From this scope of epistemology, of
estamos buscando descolonizar
are we trying to go decolonize and do a statement
de la epistemología de los pueblos, porque ese es el reto.
from the epistemology of towns.
Entender que todo nuestro marco desde
Understand that the whole framework, sociology, anthropologists, psychologists, etc., comes from this homogenic standpoint of view. So we gotta find how to decolonize. So we gotta look, take a moment to look ourselves. How do I feel? From that perspective, how am I doing my research? Is it my study, or if it's study of the community and their philosophies? So going from what I known, from my knowledge from the past, from other sciences, how do I close and recover those sciences, their roots, and denounce the problematic that we're facing? So I leave that as a reflection for you, and we come back in 10 minutes, okay?
Muy bien, bienvenidas. Vamos a continuar, solo cierro con unos aspectos finales de esta presentación y posteriormente estaría.
Welcome back. I'm just going to continue with this presentation, and we're going to go with our breakout rooms for the teamwork, which is the second part, to finish this part for what's related to the hegemonic universal science conversation. And we're going to talk about how colonization was a discourse for development, and it was concentrated in the colonization of reality because of the discourse of reality. It was colonized and neo-colonized with a discourse of development based on economic growth mainly. And it was used to colonize the world and to enforce subordination of the ways of life of cultures. In the name of that development, of that hegemonic establishment of development, you subordinate other ways of life, other establishments of life, of the other peoples and cultures. From this development pattern, we established the norm at the end of the Second World War. We have the invention of development producing substantial changes in a way that relationships between rich and poor countries is conceived. Listen to this, the invention of development. It is something that is invented and made up, and that determines the relationship between the supposed developed
powers
countries
and underdeveloped powers,
subdeveloped countries,
between
progress and savagery,
life,
and all the cultural and political and agricultural life of these societies and these territories. And they're subordinated to the strategy. And that's a establishment that we also have to have clear. And the modernization as the only way, the only strength to destroy other systems in the name of, in the way of modernity, you destroy other sciences. And modern world as something that globalizes the vision of the world, and we move sciences and technologies move, and industrialization moves, and the urbanization moves as a part of this modern world, or this mechanism to implement that discourse of development, of progress. So you have science, you have universal science, technology that is imposed by colonization, industrialization of peoples, urbanization, then you are modern. If you live in the mountain, if you live close to the oceans, you dress differently. You are not modern. You're not in progress. You're not in development. So the organizing premise is the belief that in the way of modernization, this was the only strength capable of destroying what they called superstition and archaic relations. At what cost? Any social and political cost. Everything that isn't modern is superstitious. If you kiss Mother Earth, if you have a water tank, if you place flowers and incense close to that tank, you're superstitious. That's crazy. That's dumb. That's making the tank a god. That's thinking that you are recognizing water as a god. And that's dumb, because we join around it. But for that, for the modern world, that's superstitious. That's archaic. And industrialization and urbanization are seen as inevitable and necessarily progressive and routes for modernization. That means, this country is really modern. What great skyscrapers. And within those skyscrapers, there are heating systems, AC systems. Those sky rises are generating destruction of the world. We have here factories that generate smoke and toxic gases. And here we have imposed mono agriculture. Here, people had all kinds of different crops, and now we only have palm that is exported to the world for fuel. Is that industrialization? For that model, it works perfectly. But for our peoples, it breaks with the network of life. And urbanization today talks about territorial plans with what focus? From the perspective of evolution and progress that is not in sync with the ways of life and the wisdom of peoples, and that breaks the cycle of life of the natural resources, and that ends biodiversity. Another element that we have is that the materialization and practices of different institutions that have had a great impact on the world. Social relations, ways of thinking, and the different ways of life have been marked by this establishment of progress, meaning that in our countries, the governments and the economic system function under that statement, that of progress and development, defining social relations, ways of thinking, and visions of the world, of the future of the world. Here we have politics, plans, and policies. In Guatemala, we have Plan Catún. And let's talk about the goals of the millennium. And the focus is a focus on development and progress, but it doesn't guarantee progress and biodiversity. But that is a lot of that relationship is charged onto indigenous communities. What is the role and the responsibilities that the economic powers are taking on? The ones that generate exploitation and legislate in favor of exploitation. So what are our public policies creating now? Or what is our institutionality promoting? And how this ability, these systems are concentrated, for example, in a establishment of modernity and progress, and is focused on universities and research institutes from the United States and Europe, and the Inter-American Bank for the Development and Reconstruction, and in the biggest capitals of the world, and in the institutions of power in the United States and Europe. That's where we implement that view, that hegemonic way of or perspective in this institutionalization of power, that it's not in our hands, that it's in the powers of the few, the hands of the few. And we become productive beings. And that's where you're focused on an Occidental or a Western mentality, That Western economy is made up of production systems that are sustained by capitalism and modernity. Not an economy for life, but an economy for the well-being of people and economic justice, for fair trade, for the care of natural resources. No, it's an economy based on exploitation and depletion. And economy is cultural, and it's a way to establish societies, meaning we are being formed and we're being trained to promote that economy of death. And that we are created to provide strength to that economy. And we have been accomplices of the rationalization of world economy, contributing to rationalization of politics, religion, familiarities, how we can build societies based on that. Human beings are productive beings through cultural ways of life for transformation. To transform, we move from capitalism and modern way of life that are sustained in production system and power systems in an economy of that sustains and generates and is generated by capitalism. And this capitalism generates cultural processes and generates people to produce for its own benefit. Economy dehumanizes us. And being modern as a project for double governance. The first one is the one exerted inside by national states in a idea of creating policies of homogenizing our identities. There's no differences. There's one identity. There's one state, and the one that is exerted towards the outside by the world, the modern colonial world, in their intention to establish the center is the most important thing. We're third worldly. We're on the outside. We're not on the inside. We're not modern. In these two instances, these processes make up part of a dynamic, of a specific dynamic. And here, social sciences, and that's why I make an emphasis, are constituted within that space of colonial modern belief and the beliefs generated by the system. From this point of view, we see that social sciences never established a true essence, but that the colonial system impregnated from its origins, from the colonial times all the way to this day. We have imposed, or colonization and new colonization have imposed their ways of believing, their ways of life into and has influenced in our way of life. And that's a lot of the social theorists have coincided that human race leaves ignorance very slowly, based on perfecting that colonial ways of life. When you reach maturity, when you are considered an adult socially, again, and I repeat this again, human space leaves ignorance very slowly, and they reach different developments of perfection or perfecting itself. What does this mean? It means that us as peoples, we are seen and as minors, because you reach perfection when you're an adult. We are going to reach adulthood until we are able to obtain, or we stop being ignorant and we reach a sense of knowledge based on modern world. So what's the slowest status or the lowest status in the human development is children. And that's what the American indigenous communities were described as, children. They saw us as savage. So the first characteristic is savagery, being savage. And that's where they locate originary peoples. In the complete absence of art, in the complete absence of science and writing, they don't recognize, they are not able, because of that hegemonic epistemology, that universal view, racist view. They're not able to recognize the story, the art, science, civilization of peoples. They see us as savages. And here, where the beginning of everything in America was all superstition, primitivism, and the fight of all against all. The last step of human development reached by European societies is to build change from the first moment all the way to the last, what is civilized. And they will continue seeing us like this. I was in a virtual activity when they were talking about indigenous communities. I said, this colonial matrix still exists in international organisms, in international organizations, in cooperation and policies. It continues. That's where civility reigns. The cultivation of science and arts. And that's where they reach, human beings have reached illustration. And that's where all nations of the planet should walk through. Moving from being savages and barbaric to reach civilization based on the culture of death. Individualism, predatory death culture, and commercializing everything. And that's the way that life should be. And the colonialism of knowledge in social sciences. And we're going to say this from a binary focus. Here's where we see, for example, on one side, being different is being barbaric. And from the epistemology, the hegemonic epistemology, civilization, before being barbaric and savage, and the ignorance of barbaric cultures, civilization, before tradition, customs, what is left behind, modernity is something else. Before empiric knowledge, oh, that's empiric knowledge. These are testimonies. And before the knowledge of the peoples, rationalism is the most important, being objective. What they have done of impoverishing communities and the living forth with the land and the earth, ways of living are seen as poverty. Rejecting progress. And the right thing is that development and growth. They see us as young and as infants in knowledge. They see us as the last class, as a second category, and they are mature. They are science, knowledge. They see us as charged with myths and beliefs. What we have are myths and beliefs. What they have in the system is science. And they are wise communities, peoples, small communities. And against that is societies, established civilizations, tradition on one side, what they see in their traditions, and us with modern life. And that's binary thinking, that is what colonization is establishing in social sciences. And we see that, and we say that. We find myths, and that's how we write. They're in a state of savagery. When I was listening to a documentary and they were giving us some empiric knowledge, I come to identify which are your empiric knowledge, and I compare that with exact science. How do I get to a territory with that interpretation, that interest of interpreting science and wisdom based on my own knowledge? And that's how books have been written, and that's how we continue writing. And afterwards, I'm going to say here, authors and their racism, because depending on the color of skin, you're going to have more knowledge and more moral authority. And in this, and in the works of 1804, it establishes a moral conduct code based on racism. Humanity exists and it's perfect when it's white, and it comes from the white race. Indians have less talent, and blacks are the least inferior, are the most inferior. And indigenous American people are the worst, are at the bottom of the classes. And basically this works. They classify humans in different categories. Imagine how they see us and how they continue seeing us. In 1803 of the 19th century, we have the racist and Eurocentric line referring to natural conditions of inferiority of the American Indians. America has always revealed itself and continued to reveal itself impotent in the physics as well in the spiritual aspects. In the animals itself, you advert that they are inferior to men. These peoples have weak culture, and they die when they come in contact with peoples of a superior culture. American Indians live as children that only limit themselves to existing away from everything that means thinking and elevated goals. The fact that they have weakened is because they have brought Black people to be able to work. Imagine this. So these kinds of violence are more visible, and you can see them in racial violence. Let me see how I move forward because of time. How does this capitalist epistemologic model sustains Western universities? And they're one of the main devices to reproduce colonialism of knowing and power, being knowing and power. And we all live from the colonial epistemological system. That's where we are formed.
Los conocimientos como prescientíficos.
So they take knowledge as mythological nature that don't comply with epistemological methodologies, including the knowledge of peoples, and we are considered minority. Meaning we don't have knowledge. We don't have science, because the only ones that have science is the system, colonial system. How are we going to get out of that system? How are we going to get out of that epistemology? First of all, getting out of the rules of modern world, changing the fundamentals of the way we talk, not only how we do it, but also what we say, writing our story from our own philosophies, from our own science. And the procedure is the same. It's eliminating that colonial matrix. How are we going to get out of that matrix, that power matrix that is inserted in power and in knowledge and in being, which in practice means that in our process of research, we have an epistemologic disconnection. We have to deconstruct, we have to decolonize ourselves. That patriarchal system, that racist system, that predatory system with which we have been brought up. And what does that imply? To place yourself in that frame of mind, meaning getting out of that life and recognize and place yourselves on our people and our reality and our story, and coming into a different epistemology and establish who generates knowledge and for what. Who is creating the knowledge in the universities that our children are going to, in those big centers of research? Who's creating that? For what is that produced and for whom? Another element we have to do is validate and visibilize the indigenous culture through the creators themselves, eliminating and moving to the side a path of an illustrated knowledge of white North-centric professionals, and give ourselves the right and the responsibility of writing and researching based on our thinking, our cosmo knowledge, and our philosophies, and our cosmovision, coming into dialogue with our ancestors, coming into dialogue and connection with water, with the fire, with the wind, with the earth. Making sure we shake our feet and coming closer with humility and respect to those who still save and have preserved that science and that knowledge without denying other sciences. We can't deny the existence of a model, even if it's a hegemonic of an exact science. It could serve us as tools. We are not going to turn our backs to those other sciences, but we are going to come into, again, taking away that colonialism and that colonialism in being. We're going to come into our territories and our peoples and start seeing ourselves and understanding us. But that requires a process of decolonialization. We need to leave colonization behind. And we have to stop the neocolonization from establishing itself. And it's current, but it doesn't end us. We are alive. Our systems are alive, and we finish this part with this, and we're going to give way to the work in groups. The question is, on what basis are we doing our own research? That question is the one I'm going to leave with you with. What is the epistemology? What is the method, research method? What is our way of seeing how we're going to reach different territories from this colonial matrix, from this epistemology, or from the knowledge of the peoples? And I invite you from today as a homework, let's start criticizing our studies and our research papers from that point of view. And we are going to give way to an opinion. We only have 15 minutes, but maybe somebody can give us an opinion We're going to start with Asia. We're going to go ahead and have one opinion, so then we can start doing our introduction to intercultural research. And we're going to analyze, we're going to take our hegemonic epistemology that we just analyzed, and we're going to compare it to the millennial knowledge of our peoples. And we're going to ask Asia to present your social drama to see how it is in practice in the intercultural research, if you guys are ready to present. Africa or Asia, or if not, we're going to go ahead and move forward with America. I didn't give you a chance to share comments or questions on the subject, but if you have questions or opinions, we can get, so we have time for maybe two questions or opinions, and then we will have the group present your homework. Any comment or question? No? So we're going to move forward to presenting. I don't know which of the three groups are ready. Asia, Africa, or America? With your social drama? The Latin America group is ready. Okay, so when she shares her screen, we're going to do this exercise 1, 2, 3, 4 towards the back, 2, 3, 4 towards the front, and we're going to give America the space to present the subject that we're going to look into the next session, which is intercultural research. You can start.
¿Sí se escucha?
Sí se escucha.
Okay, we can hear you. Yes, go ahead. No, we can't hear anything. I have a question, Duna. So you can hear the audio video, you need to have an open mic from Zoom? No, you have to share your screen.
Que dice compartir audio, como un cuadrito, tú le das ahí compartir audio y ya te lo deja compartir.
I'm just giving instructions on how to share your screen.
Pantalla y vuelves a iniciar.
All right, so she's trying to find she's going to present a video and they're going to load the audio. So please take a little moment, just so you know what's happening. She's going to project a video and they're trying to put her audio. So bear with us for a few.
Voy a iniciar otra vez y me dicen si se escucha el audio.
I'll start over again. Please let me know if you can listen to the audio.
Buenas tardes, estamos con el grupo
Good
de
afternoon. This is a intercultural research team. Today we're going to do...
Se escucha.
Sí. Gracias.
un sociodrama. Estamos en una comunidad aymara.
This is our
Nuestro
work.
tema
This is our research
sobre
topic is nutritional plants and their
comunidad
functions based in the community of Canamilla in the year 2024.
que ya les
This is a community
dentro de
from the town Ayumara.
los personajes son
This is our
Jane,
characters. Jane, which is French.
nutrición y está
She has a
haciendo.
nutrition postgraduate.
Uma es abuelita,
Uma is a
sabedora de
grandmother and knows the ancestors' ways.
nuestra
And
investigadora
Jessie is an intercultural researcher.
de Uma.
And she's a granddaughter as well.
En el escenario,
Here's
Jane
her scenario. Jane is studying her postgraduate on nutrition, and she's talking to the grandmother, Aymara, because she has discovered the Aihara.
Uma, ¿me podrías contar más sobre la
Uma,
jara?
can you tell me more about Ahara?
Es un alimento
I found that this is a method of cropping that you
Quisiera
use a lot in your community. How do you prepare it?
porque
How do you
quiero
crop it?
un
Because I want
congreso,
to present
voy a
it
participar,
in a congress that I'm going to be
quiero hacer carne.
participating, and I want to do vegan meats out of it.
Sí, la jara es una
Ahara,
planta de
it's a plant
calidad,
from our community.
nutrientes.
It's rich in
La
nutrients.
usamos casi a diario en
We use it daily
platos, como
in our
en
dishes,
agua, en sopa,
in waters, in soups,
también en refrescos, justo
in
en las
refreshments,
épocas de sequía,
especially in
especialmente
drought
en
area
invierno
season.
y no llegan las lluvias. La
Because
jara la
sometimes the Ahara is also used
en los meses de mayo,
in the months of May,
la guardamos
and we store it
casi un año que nos va a
for
durar.
almost a year.
Entonces, la forma de preparar esta
The way
semilla
that we prepare it, we take the seed,
es moliendo la jara. Entonces,
we
una
grind
de
it,
nuestras sopas
which is
que
indoor soup,
tenemos es la agua, la que
where we
se
have
usa
water,
los huesos de la llama,
where we use the bones,
que se llama charque. También tenemos
from
harina de
charque.
maíz
We use corn
vegetales
meat,
que se puedan encontrar.
corn flour, and some vegetables.
Y también esta se la usa bastante
And then this is also used
como forma medicinal.
in
Nos
as a
ha servido
medicinal way too,
para fiebre,
because it helps with fevers,
para dolores
with colds, muscle body, stomach aches,
¿no? Y
and also it helps prevent cancer.
el tema del COVID,
When we talk
justo
about COVID,
se llegó a consumir
it
esto
was
para
also
personas que
used
sufrieron bastante con lo que es
for
la fiebre.
people who suffer
También
from that pandemic.
que es un
With the
pancito
chisina, which is
que le acompañamos
a
con un
small dish that we
de
provide
moña
with teas, whether it's moña tea
y
or
también tenemos
barley.
nuestros refrescos servidos
And then we
que
have also a refreshment that is served
en los
that is
días
very refreshing
cuando se
in days that were hot,
pasar a los animales, en las
when
chacras cuando
we're out
se
walking the animals
y es
or out
un
in
buen
the harvest.
energizante en ese aspecto.
So it's a good energizer as
Hoy
well.
en día la jara
Today,
se va
Ahara
perdiendo. Los jóvenes ya no
is
consumen
being lost because our youth is not using them
esta
anymore.
planta. Muchos de ellos
They don't know the plant
es
anymore.
una hierba mala en sus
They say that it's a bad seed,
las amontonan recolectando y también les dan al
and this
chancho
is also
que consuman. Es muy triste
for
ver
further consumption.
nuestros jóvenes actuales
Our
ya
youth
no
currently
consumen.
are no longer consuming this anymore.
Buenos días, abuelita.
Good morning, Grandma.
¿Cómo está? ¿Qué está
How
haciendo?
are you? I
Vengo
hope you're
dejando
doing
unos
well.
frijolitos.
I'm here to drip you some beans.
Hola, ¿y usted quién es?
Who are you?
Hola, mucho gusto.
Hi,
Yo
how
soy
are you?
Jane y
My
estoy
name is Jane,
haciendo una
and I'm
investigación sobre
doing
la
a study on this plant
ustedes
that I
consumen mucho.
discovered that you consume a lot.
Cuénteme, Jane. ¿Usted
Tell me,
pidió
Jane,
permiso a
did you
sus
ask permission
abuelos? ¿Ya habló con los
to our grandparents to talk about this?
¿Tiene la autorización para estar
Do you have the
aquí
authorization to do this research?
Bueno, Jessie, no
Well, Jesse, no, not
tengo
really.
permiso del
I
gobierno
have the
y también de
permission
la
by the government
Secretaría de Educación y
and by the
Cultura,
secretary of the
por eso estoy aquí.
university to be here.
Bueno, usted tiene que
All right.
tener la
You have
autorización
to have the authorization
de líderes de la comunidad
of our leaders in the community
de mostrar
because
respeto a
this is
nuestro
a way
pueblo.
to show respect to our town.
Usted no está descubriendo nada
You're
aquí.
not discovering anything
Ya usamos
because we
catorce
already know this plant for many years, thousands of years. And it's a very important plant in our culture and food. It's a medicinal food seed plant. It's a historical plant for us as a community.
Bueno, yo no tengo
All
ninguna
right.
autorización.
I don't have any authorization. But like I was saying,
El
I have
gobierno
the
y
government's information and my
queda yo
secretary as well. And honestly, I need to do this research
porque mi trabajo va a
because
ser
my
presentado
work is going to be presented in a Congress in France. And there's an innovative
donde
product that I'm going to present
pues producir
where I'll be able to
innovador producto. Usted
show this
sabe que
innovative product. You know that it's a vegan product.
Sí, sabemos lo que es un producto vegano,
Yes, I know what a vegan product is. And I want to ask you
lo que
is,
es una investigación
do
intercultural.
you know what a research is?
Conocer más del
I'll
tema
ask you to
porque
know more about the process. Because in our community,
y la acción
we don't believe in
participativa,
horizontal lines. We talk about participation.
nosotras
We're all get involved.
conocedores
We
y
all know about it. And authors of our own knowledge, of our ancestors' knowledge.
Bueno, acabamos
All right.
de observar un sociodrama sobre lo que
This
es
is our presentation for you. An example of Jesse was saying
de
that it's
hablar de
important to highlight, to talk
intercultural.
about
Nosotras
intercultural in research.
concluimos que
What we wanted to conclude is this
enfoque
research has to be done with an approach
una
that
interacción
studies an interaction in
con
the cultures
promover
with the
un
objective
diálogo.
of promoting a dialogue and tolerance and respect.
Ella tendría que consultar
Nobody
sobre
should have to
conocimientos
consult
sin
about our own knowledge without having our authorization.
una investigación
It's based
intercultural
on acknowledging and valuing the cultural diversity,
diversidad cultural, identificar cuáles
as
son
well as
estas
identifying the
similitudes,
similitudes and differences between the different ways of beliefs and
las
practices
creencias.
from different groups and communities.
Nuestra investigación debe promover que nuestras propias voces sean
Our
escritas sin
own voices should be
intervención de
promoted
terceros.
and reading in the research itself.
La investigación
And we feel
intercultural
that intercultural research should have the following characteristics: recognize diversity,
sensibilidad
show
cultural,
cultural sensitivity,
culturas y
allow
reconocer
dialogues of the cultures, and recognize that it's
debe
collaborative,
la
and promote
reflexión.
the reflection, respect, and ethic.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Bien, muchas gracias al grupo.
Very well. To the Latin America group, thank you for this contribution. And listening to you and this play, I know the contribution will be great in the same dimension that we're discussing here. We do the comparison between the system that we just talked about, where it's this epistemology, which is a straight line, that I come to the territories without authorization, just take and take and take. And here, we need to load that knowledge of the towns, and we got to defend them and acknowledge the wisdom of the ancestors. So, Ava Jaggi did very clear description. I would like to listen to two opinions of this presentation from Asia, Africa. What do you think? Very brief comments. What did you think of what was presented? What are your thoughts on this presentation? What will be your contribution? Would you have a question to add to this? I could name you, but I would rather have you do it voluntarily.
Mayora Lorena, qué pena. Me pidió que sí, que le recordara. 2 minutos.
Muy bien, entonces creo que el tiempo las favorece.
Okay, so time will save you today. We'll do this exercise, this reflection on Friday, on this presentation done by the team on what is intercultural research. This assignment is also for for Asia and Africa, and that's how we're going to be doing starting our day next time. And then we're going to start with the second module. So what is intercultural research? which is a big contribution that we're going to be discussing ourselves into the introduction of this topic. So that's the topic for our next assignment, our next week, our next meeting. And there's another assignment left there in the platform. So please work on it and send it to the within the platform. And also you can send it to the chat as well, to Dunin, so that we can have the information at hand of the session of Tuesday. Thank you very much. I want to present our work, which is the presentations right now, and the platform that you're going to download from the platform. So today's Tuesday, so we'll see you again on Friday. This assignment is for Friday, okay? On what is intercultural research. Thank you for your contributions. I think that we did a lot of information. We came with the right attitude. I saw this information, and you find out that the attitude of the grandmother on giving information, she was just giving information freely because her prominent towns are used to this. And in this trust, they're very trustworthy, and because of this trust is what we see ourselves the issues that we have in certain areas. So we're guardians of that knowledge and be alert of all the different tests from people from masters and doing the different studies. But the knowledge never comes back to us. We see proposals, but we never see the proposal come to us as a feedback. So we got to stop this. We got to put an end to that. This is why, as researchers, we got to do that labor and generate this change and recover the science of our ancestors, the knowledge of our ancestors, and that epistemology of knowing that the towns, we have sciences, in knowledge. We can recreate research, take into account other systems. So I don't know if we're done with the 2 minutes. Yes, we are. Well, so this we'll see you again on Friday. We're going to start with the presentations of the other groups and ask somebody from Asia to do the invocation on that session. In your own way, you can do drawings. You can send us in the chat box an element or no more than 7 minutes. And we'll begin with the Asia and Africa presentation. Thank you very much. And may you have a great day. Have a nice full rest for the rest of you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.